Hello, my name is Jared Morris and this is Settled Christianity, coming at you today looking at a pretty major event that occurred recently in the last few weeks. I'm sure none of you missed it, but here in the last few weeks, the historical Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris burnt partially down. Not, there is still a lot of the building remaining, but a good portion of it did burn. And there's a debate that has really started now about, when looking at this cathedral, how should Christians feel about it? On one side, there's a lot of people saying that this is a good part of the history of the West, and that this is history of Christianity, is what a lot of secular sources are saying, and that it's a very, very significant building, a historical building, and that Christians should feel bad about it, being burnt. But on the flip side, there's a lot of Christians arguing that, in terms of the history of Notre Dame, that there's a lot of biblical Christians who died there at Notre Dame or in the area by Catholics. They were killed by Catholics for not standing with the beliefs of the Catholic Church. And so the argument goes that we should not feel bad about Notre Dame burning because the people in the past would celebrate, really, that past Christians would be very, very happy to see a building where such great catastrophe happened. And so I just thought I'd bring it to you, and just an idea of how do we look at these historical buildings, how do we look at Catholic churches particularly, and how do we balance the idea that they are both historical and also some horrific events against Christians have occurred here in the past. So first off, on the one side, I do understand this idea that just on the base level of the Notre Dame's beauty and Notre Dame's techniques and the expertise that went into building that cathedral, I do mourn the loss of the beauty and those techniques. There's styles and techniques of building a cathedral like that we've just forgotten through history. And I believe that with any building that is this old, going back all the way to the 13th century, some parts of it, that when we see a building that old burn, I do mourn the loss, that it was a very beautiful building. I do mourn the loss of, these techniques that we've forgotten and we're not able to look at anymore and look at, this is how people were doing things in centuries past. So on just the surface level, I believe that this is a bad loss, something that we should mourn. And I also understand this idea that whenever there is something historical burned, it's harder to comprehend the history of it. It's more interactive to go into a building and say, oh wow, this is where some historical events occurred. This is where this king stood, or this person, etc., etc. All the way back for all these centuries, and it can be hard. It can be hard to imagine history without these places standing still. And I do hope that the burning of Notre Dame does not deeply harm this pursuit of history. But now on the other side, I do want to say that this does play into a little bit. And, I have the verse here in Romans 8:28. It says, and we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are called according to his purpose. And we know this is talking about individuals, but we know as a general principle, God is bringing about his purpose in the world, in the universe, in major events that occur in history. God is working in them to bring about good, to bring about, what he hopes to see, what he plans to see in history. And so I hope on the other side that with the burning down of Notre Dame, that we can really look at the history and become very introspective about what we see. First, as Christians, when we look at the history of Notre Dame and we see the great persecution that many biblical Christians went through in centuries past, the Protestants or even the pre-Protestants, the Mennonites and the Anabaptists, people like those followers, they suffered greatly at the hands of the Catholic Church, and many of them in France, some at the at Notre Dame Cathedral. I believe that Christians should look at this and get a sense of courage from spiritual fathers who came before them, those who went to the stake to die, or went to another form of martyrdom for the faith. And we can get courage, and we can get a security in knowing that those people walked before us and they went through it and God worked through them, that we can see this in their lives. But also through more secular people or through Catholics, I pray that this event, they can look at it and they can look at the history and they can kind of spark the interest of, who are these people that the Catholics are killing throughout time? Who are these people who are standing for their faith at Notre Dame? And I do believe that, no matter how uncomfortable it is, I believe that it has to be talked about, that there were people who were martyred at Notre Dame Cathedral, that there were Christians who died there. And it can be very easy for many secular people just to wash over that kind of awkward bit of such a beautiful building's history, but that history is still there. The Catholic Church still persecuted those who did not agree with them. And I pray that people look at it and really start thinking, why did these people die for their faith? Why were the Catholics interested in killing these people? And I'm also really praying that through the burning of Notre Dame, it can really help some people into this mindset, or at least out of the mindset, that Catholic history is Christian history. I think this is one of the biggest struggle with many secular people who are not saved, or atheists or agnostics, is they do not understand that, or they don't understand that there were other people besides Catholics in history. That and even a lot of Christians who are uninformed think this. They look at Christian history and they say, "Oh, it's just Catholics." Catholics stood all the way back through all through the centuries, etc., etc., and up till the Reformation, it was just Catholics. And then after the Reformation, it was Protestants and Catholics. But the fact is that there have always been people who have stood against Catholicism, against heresy throughout time. People who believed in biblical salvation, of salvation by faith, by grace through faith in Jesus Christ our Lord. There have always been those people who stood the test of time, those saints who came before us. And I hope that this can help both Christians and secular people create that divide in their mind, that there were Catholics, but there were also those that Catholics killed, who just by nature of being persecuted didn't get to record their history as much as Catholics, who didn't get to tell their side as much as Catholics, who didn't build great cathedrals like Catholics did. And we should remember that Catholicism wasn't Christianity, or wasn't default Christianity throughout history, but there were those who stood against it. So kind of in conclusion, I hope that, I am saddened by the loss of a beautiful building. I'm saddened by the loss of a historical building, but I pray that through its destruction, we can see people become more open-minded to Christianity, and Christians coming to deeper terms with Christian history and understanding that Catholic history is not Christian history. But with that, I'm going to say end to this video, I guess. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you have some ideas. If you have any thoughts, leave them in the comments. I always love reading comments when I get them. And if you enjoyed it, please like, subscribe, share, come back for more. Grace's video will be out Wednesday, and I'll be back next Sunday. So I will see all of you next week. This has been Jared Morris with Settled Christianity, helping you continue in the faith.